gain at particularly around midlife and this time is more related to lifestyle changes and aging as opposed to hormones alone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. I'm Courtney, and this is not my brother Paris today. We have a very special guest, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to you. But I do want to say Dr. Daiana Castleman is not only an incredible healthcare practitioner, and you're going to learn more about her field of expertise in just a second. She's also one of my very close friends, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with her today about a topic that I think we're both very passionate about, and we have all these like off-air conversations about this all the time. And I wanted to bring this to Truth Talks, bring our conversations to Truth Talks, because I think a lot of people will really benefit from your perspective, Dee, and I'm so excited for them to hear it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Courtney.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. So as Courtney mentioned, I am a naturopathic doctor, and I'm also certified with the Menopause Society. My practice really focuses in helping women transition through perimenopause into postmenopause with ease and really supporting their health and longevity when they're in postmenopause. And so one of those discussions that I have every single day in my office is around the weight changes and the body composition changes that women are having during this time. I'd love to dive more deep into this topic because there's so much misinformation around this topic as well. And I think that's why it's so important we keep having these conversations.
Without a doubt. And I think it's important to remember that 50% of the population is going to go through menopause at some point in time. We historically think about it as like, oh, this niche thing or this side conversation. 50% of the population is going to experience it or is currently experiencing it or has in the past, right? So
yeah,
we really need to emphasize that this is not such a niche topic as we think it is. And even if you're not in that 50%, meaning if you are a male listening to this or just going about your fitness journey or like thinking about the women in your life who are on their own fitness journeys, it's really important to understand that as well so you can support them the best you can. And so like you said, right, like this is a conversation you have every day in your practice. I'd love to hear a little bit about what kind of questions your patients have when they come to you about menopause and weight gain. Like what would be the number one question that they approach you with?
So I would say what I very commonly hear is I used to be able to exercise more, eat less, and I could lose weight, and that no longer works now. Or I haven't changed anything and I'm gaining weight. I would say those two definitely are the biggest things that I hear.
And how do you then engage in that conversation? Like, I think first of all, actually, before we get into how we engage in that conversation, I think it's understandable that people feel that way, right? And we hear it with our clients too. We have a lot of clients who are perimenopausal and are joining us to help them transform their bodies and help them kind of reclaim a body composition that makes them feel really, really excited and confident. And it is a challenge, and there are unique nuances when it comes to fat loss during menopause, and we'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, it is still the fat loss principles at play, right? And so I'd love to hear from you, like when somebody comes to you and they said, oh, well, I used to do this, I used to do that. How do you then engage? What's your follow-up question look like?
So first, we definitely start with the education piece on what is happening at this time, with the hormone changes. So during the menopause transition, women do experience an overall increase in fat mass, particularly abdominal fat. So what we know is that estrogen influences where fat is stored. And so as estrogen declines, fat storage does begin to favor the abdomen. That is a very real experience. And I want to acknowledge that because that is the primary complaint. And that's where you see right now on social media, even though I really don't like this term, people are using the term belly fat, right? To kind of describe the menopausal weight gain, but that is what women are referring to. So this can mean more fat around your abdominal organs, which we term visceral adipose tissue, or in your abdomen in general, which would be that subcutaneous adipose tissue. And so these changes in fat distribution can actually occur even without substantial weight gain. And I think this is really important to highlight because this is where we need to be talking and focusing more on body composition rather than just like the number on the scale, right? Because that is a big topic for sure. And I understand my patient's concern around that abdominal weight gain because if there is potentially more visceral fat, that drives drives chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, increased cardiometabolic risk. And so it is something, right, that we want to be paying attention to. Now, the most significant changes are going to be occurring in the 4 years surrounding your final menstrual period. So the 2 years before and the 2 years after your last menstrual period. And then after that, we actually see that there's typically a plateau in body composition measures. So it's really this 4-year window that drives a lot of changes that women see. And if we look at the overall weight gain that we typically see around this time, it really is between 1 to 2.5 kilograms or between 2 and 5.5 pounds, like during the menopause transition. So that's with again, the disproportionate increase in central fat deposition. Now, the reason why I want to highlight these numbers is because women, are coming into my office, they might be reporting 10, 15, 20 plus weight gain during this time. And what's really important to highlight here is that we're not saying that hormones are not having an influence. They definitely are, but it's not accounting for all this weight gain, right? There are many other factors and environmental factors we need to take into account. And this is actually exactly what we see in the literature, is that weight gain at particularly around midlife and this time is more related to lifestyle changes and aging as opposed to hormones alone. So again, I'm not discrediting that hormones are not having a play, but it is not accounting for 10, like I said, 15, 20, pound weight gain during this time.
Right.
So yeah, that's where I typically start.
Oh my gosh. So many things in there that I want to unpack. So I'm going to start with what I heard from you in a nutshell is, yes, there are changes in body composition at this time driven by hormones, particularly estrogen. But we do need to really pay attention to the difference between body weight and body composition here, right? Because when you look at body weight, you said it's kind of around 5 pounds, which is a normal rate of weight gain in that period. But it is interesting to think about the fat distribution patterns and how that plays a role as well. And also a reason why we talk so much about fat loss in general and not just weight gain and weight loss, and trying to help people understand that ultimately it is a body composition play that, to help you feel good and to help you, weight management is very important. But there is this distinctive notion of fat loss and instead of just weight loss, right? And in this case, even I'm sure people's bodies probably change a lot in terms of how they look just because those fat distribution patterns are changing. And for some people that might leave a more stark impression, and then I imagine they think they're gaining more weight than maybe they actually are. Right? Because they're seeing their body change. And so we always encourage our clients, particularly, let's look at progress photos, right? Let's look at pictures and see how you look and how you feel, and, not just rely on that number of the scale, so that we can get a better representation of your body composition as a whole.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, so I do want to talk about then the second piece of the convo that you started, which was around, why people think they might gain more weight than they actually gain as in terms of attributed to hormonal changes or menopausal changes, right? And you said it's a lot of environmental factors. And anybody who's listened to this podcast with Paris and I before, we talk so much about the lifestyle component. Yes. That's what we preach over and over and over and over again. And so what I love about having you here today, Dr. D, is because Dr. D, that's what I'm going to call you today, Dr. D, is because you have the science knowledge, the medical realities of menopause through and through. And so we can talk about the role of hormones, but we also can talk about that lifestyle piece. And so why then, are you seeing patients come in saying, hey, I'm gaining 15, 20 pounds when, the reality scientifically and medically is that you're not really gaining that amount of weight just from going through a menopause transition?
Yes. So many different areas to consider, and I'll just kind of name a few that are coming to mind. So number one, from a hormone perspective, what I want to highlight is that if you are experiencing, menopause symptoms, let's say hot flashes, night sweats, sleep disturbances, please get those treated. That I cannot emphasize that enough. There's so many supports that we have in place, because that is going to contribute to less movement, or it's going to affect your eating behavior patterns.
Yes.
We need to definitely treat those menopausal symptoms. So that's first what I want to say, is that those definitely can affect your activities of daily living.
So really,
sorry,
I'm interrupting you, but I just want to I think what you just said is so important. It's when you are experiencing side effects of menopause, which are very real, it changes how you live your life ultimately. It changes the quality
Mm-hmm.
of your life. And that does shift your decisions around movement and food. I
Mm-hmm.
have not yet experienced the menopause transition. I got a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah.
But I can anticipate if you have really, really bad headaches, for example, I'm not going to be inspired to go out for a walk or like go hit my, training session in the same way. Or, like those sleep disturbances lead to levels of fatigue that then hold us back from moving quite as much. And there's, I think we
Mm-hmm.
can talk more about sleep and its role with appetite
For
management and
sure.
stuff too. But I
Yeah.
think what's so important to highlight here is what you're saying is the side effects that women do experience in the menopause transition have very real lifestyle implications.
For sure, the symptoms definitely do. And one thing I will say is that depending on what our environment is in terms of what we're told, maybe from our healthcare providers or like family members, a lot of women are told to push through, right? And so even when we look at the hot flashes and night sweats, for example, on
Mm-hmm.
average, they can last 7.4 years. That's a
Wow.
long time. Right. So
Yeah.
when we think about this
Holy
idea of like,
smokes.
oh, I'll keep just pushing through, like that's a long time
Mm-hmm.
to be waiting. And, the average time frame for perimenopause, those years leading up to your final menstrual period, is around 4 to 8 years. Again, that is a long time to
Mm-hmm.
be, suffering with these symptoms. Right. So
Yeah.
again, making sure that if you are not feeling well and you feel like you are experiencing symptoms of menopause, please make sure to get support from a healthcare provider, because that will definitely influence, and sometimes we don't realize it, right? Like time
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
passes. And if we
Right.
were to think about actually when I felt my best, this is what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing, right? Sometimes it's that reflection point because we do forget, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I realized I accidentally said side effects. I totally meant symptoms. I think of them as like, it is an effect on the side of going through the transition. I totally meant symptoms. Yeah. So then what other kind of lifestyle
Hmm.
changes do you see? Because we talked
Yeah.
about, the symptoms, and we talked just briefly about sleep, but what are really the
Yeah.
main lifestyle factors that you see your patients experiencing
Hmm.
that do affect their changes in
For
body
sure.
composition?
So, for some, alcohol consumption can increase during this time, and that
Okay.
can be potentially a coping mechanism, right? Maybe that has been the way that they are now falling asleep and trying to support
Mm.
maybe other symptoms. So, we want to be mindful of our alcohol intake. What I will also say about midlife is that it is more of the sandwich generation
Mm-hmm.
where you can be caring for aging parents, for your children as well, if you do have children.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women also at this time are at the peak of their careers. Like there's so
Yeah.
many factors going on, and that those definitely are barriers to
Mm-hmm.
potentially being consistent with the things
Mm-hmm.
that used to be consistent in, because you have other things that are taking up a lot of your time. So that is a tougher one, right? When we have these things that, yeah, that come into our life and that, we have responsibilities for that are sometimes hard to change. Right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, I think, is important. There is the emotional eating, autopilot
Mm-hmm.
eating, living a more sedentary lifestyle. One thing I found, and I'm sure you talk to your clients about this as well, is we talk a lot about NEAT
Mm-hmm.
exercise. So
Yes.
NEAT
Oh, love
stands
neat.
for, yeah, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And it really refers to the energy expended for all activities that we do throughout the day that are not things like structured exercise or sleeping or eating. So it's activities like, going to work, doing household chores, gardening, things like that. And they do play a significant role in our daily energy expenditure and metabolism. And one thing I have found, when I talk to my patients is some will say, well, actually, we moved, 2 years ago, and I didn't realize, we used to live in the city. I used to walk everywhere.
Mm.
And now where we moved, I'm driving everywhere all the time. And I
Yeah.
didn't really realize that was, maybe playing a role. And again, it's like that reflection component. We know we saw with the pandemic, right? We had
Yeah.
much more sedentary lifestyles when we weren't commuting and doing other things. So again, sometimes it's a reflection to see, what has happened in your life, what has changed, because it could
Mm-hmm.
have just
Mm-hmm.
coincided around the same time that, perimenopause was taking place. So that's another thing that I often will like to screen and look for. The other big one I would say is that with these hormone changes, we can see a lot of mood changes with women. So when I say mood changes, we can see new onset depression, new onset anxiety, and a lot of women, especially if they maybe have had a history of, let's say, they had postpartum depression, or they had PMDD, PMS, like some other type of hormonal change. They can be exacerbated at perimenopause. And again, that's going to interfere with adoption of a healthy lifestyle. So importance here again of making sure that we support mood symptoms as well.
So life stage comes with other lifestyle changes, and also then the mood changes accompanied by the menopause transition. So now when you put those things together, your life in general looks incredibly different. Your mood shapes your perspective of the world around you, right? And also you are making environmental changes that change the world around you. So like inside and out, we are seeing this dramatic shift in life that happens at the same time and happens in parallel, right? And I want to go back to what you said about NEAT, because one thing we know about NEAT is it can contribute like 3 times more to your daily expenditure than your exercise sessions themselves. And I think that's something people often overlook, right? Like NEAT is so important. And it's why we talk about like setting daily step count targets, because it's a great way of indicating NEAT, right? And how we move throughout our day. And as you were talking about NEAT, you spoke a little bit about, it's a contributor to metabolism, and metabolism is essentially energy expenditure across the course of your day and your life activities. But I think related to that, there is a huge myth around metabolism and menopause that I'd love to explore with you if we can. Just people think their metabolism slows down. And I don't even think it's just menopause. I think it's midlife in general. People have this thought of, oh, my metabolism slows down because I'm past 40. And the literature that I've seen and the research I've seen is it's not actually the case. It's not like we see this huge, after 40, we see this huge drop off in your basal metabolic rate. We do see a slight linear decline across time as we age. That's factual. But it's not the drop off we expect when we get to midlife. And so I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about how those lifestyle factors then intersect with how our expenditure changes, and why it's maybe not metabolism in the way that we think it is, or society often tells us it is.
For sure. You're right. It definitely is a big myth that it just drops off all of a sudden. I always say what can often feel like a slow metabolism during this time is often less muscle, less movement, more fatigue, poor sleep, increased cravings and hunger. And then if you have all of those, it's this, recipe, right? It's a perfect storm for sure. And again, if we focus on those specific aspects, for a lot of people, they will see that, like I said, it doesn't actually have to do with the massive drop in metabolism. It really is those other pieces that are making the bigger role in their energy expenditure.
You nailed that. Like, I just want to say, like, that was such a perfect, like, summary of how those things all add up, right? Like, those are the things to look out for. Loss of muscle. You said less sleep.
Less movement.
Less
more
movement.
Fatigue.
I just want to recap them here.
And increased cravings and hunger.
Exactly. So those are all things that just accompany, I think, all of the life stage changes you spoke about earlier, right? You talked about how, careers play a role. If your stress level goes up, of course, that's going to affect things like autopilot eating. It's only natural. And I think that's part of the conversation here today is like, we want people to understand that it's okay to be experiencing this, because we're all human and like these things happen naturally and almost intuitively. But without that understanding, we can't make positive changes.
For sure.
Before we actually understand like what is happening that is driving body composition changes in menopause and weight gain, or, struggles with weight loss, we need to first understand exactly what is happening. And I think you completely just nailed it when we talked about those factors. So if we can,
sorry, I was just going to add, coming back to that point earlier of, I haven't changed anything, but I'm gaining weight. The one thing I really want to emphasize here, and what I typically say is, change is necessary, right? It's not necessarily that the rules have changed in perimenopause, to your point, because they haven't, but the margins have gotten tighter, right? There's essentially less room for error. So the way that I position it is that your body may be more forgiving, like of inconsistent habits before, right? So before, maybe in your 20s, 30s, early 40s, like you could do those things and they paid off. But now you may notice in perimenopause, skipping meals or under eating will backfire, right? With cravings and fatigue. You don't recover from poor sleep or high stress as easily. Again, alcohol affects you differently. High sugar snacks affect you differently. So like I said, it's more when we're having this conversation as a whole, it's about going through all these different factors. Because I'm not saying that each single one of these every person has. It's about
Right.
which one do you feel like is impacting you the most? And let's start there.
And it makes it feel so much more actionable to approach it that way. I think there's a sense of like hopelessness or helplessness around midlife transitions like this, right? And just being like, oh, well, it's going to happen because it's inevitable. But it's not inevitable, right? And
No.
I think taking that time to appreciate what's really happening, go through each of those factors with, and especially with a practitioner like yourself who is an expert and, you know, objective and can actually see the person as an individual at the same time and help guide the conversation. Like, I can't imagine a better way to start actually taking charge of your body composition, or menopause or otherwise, right? Like, I think a lot of these same rules apply whether you're in this life stage or not. But just
Correct.
having somebody to go alongside with you and be like, hey, let's take a look at all of these things that could be affecting you. How do you feel about them? What does your experience actually look like? And then, you know, what action plan can we come up with to help you feel
For
confident and in
sure.
charge? Yeah.
And for many, these body composition changes they've been seeing typically can happen over, right, a couple of years. And so we also can't expect for everything to revert back in 6 weeks. I just want to highlight that, right? This is a lifelong strategy in terms of like lifestyle changes, right? We want to make lifestyle changes that are sustainable. This is not a short-term strategy. So I always sometimes like to highlight that because we can forget that it is taking time to gain the weight. And so like I said, we need to also have actionable steps, but be patient in that process as well, because those are, you know, the programs and things that sell really well is promising those 4 to 6 week transformations, right? And like I said, we just need to make sure we're making these behavioral changes as well.
And they're foundational. If you put the time in, it will last, right? I often think that the amount of time you're willing to give something is kind of the amount of time you're going to get back out of it, right? And like, this menopause is not a 6 weeks challenge, right? Like, it's just not. And so we can't expect the same thing when it comes to the weight management or fat loss around menopause either. I love that you said that this transition does happen gradually because it's lifestyle transition. We often just don't think of it as a compounding effect because we're just living, right? Like we're just living. We're going through time as humans and we're thinking, okay, well, time is passing. That's cool. And then when all of a sudden we're confronted with the reality of where we're at, we think it's sudden, but it's not. It is, you know, sometimes years of certain behaviors. And I think we, as people who work with others on their fat loss goals and on their body composition goals, we owe them the right to tell them that they deserve patience and they deserve time and they deserve trial and error, right?
Sure.
Because like, some of it is figuring out what works for you. Like you said, right? Not every single one of these things applies to everybody. So we need to spend the time understanding what applies most in your case. Let's dig into it. Let's try something. Hey, that didn't work. Let's try something else, right? And that process does take some time, but it also doesn't mean that it's impossible or out of reach.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to talk a little bit now about like what are some of the actionable items that or action items that people can start to think about? So if we go through some of the factors you said are usually kind of associated with the lifestyle changes around the menopause transition or just around midlife in general, because I think actually a lot of this stuff applies to men as well. Like we're talking about menopause in women, of course, but I think a lot of this also applies to men. So if you're a man listening, keep listening. So let's talk about those different variables and how we can best manage them in midlife. I want to start with, can I start with the one I'm very passionate about, which is actually the first one you said, which was loss of muscle mass. So can we talk about that first and foremost, and how do we, let's say, combat that in midlife?
For sure. So with respect to the muscle piece, During the menopause transition, again, as we're seeing that fat mass increase, we can see a decrease in lean muscle mass. But again, it is not a drastic drop off. During the menopause transition, it can be about 0.13 pounds per year. Okay. So it's not like it's a drastic drop off. The biggest driver of muscle loss is actually aging. And so starting around age 30, women can lose about 0.37% of muscle mass per year, unless we're going to be focusing on strength training and adequate protein during those years.
Yes,
so those are going to be the
things.
yes, those are going to be the things that are going to help with that support. But it actually really starts around age 30. Again, this is not to scare anyone. It's to say that there is this aging aspect of over time. And so again, it's not like it's plummeting at menopause, but going through that transition, like I said, that's when women really tend to see it more, right? It's not necessarily in their 30s, but they're going to see it more at that stage. So
and this is compounded with other things as well. For sure. That time, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And again, when we think about, things like longevity, muscle is one of our biggest assets, right? For a lot of my patients, when it comes to their health goals, they tell me things like they want that mobility, that independence. They want to play with their grandchildren. They want to be able to sit with them, play with them, be able to get off the ground and not be in pain. It's things like that. And I think those are fantastic health goals to have. And it really starts with what you're doing in your 40s and your 50s, and your 30s and before that too. But really focusing on that muscle component is really key.
It really reinforces to us that muscle isn't just aesthetics, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I do love the aesthetic side of it. That's something I train for, but it's not the biggest asset of muscle, right? Having muscle on your body is functional, is longevity, is quality of life in so many ways. And I think that's another reason why, we are having this conversation today that is kind of rooted in body composition changes and weight loss, but really what we're talking about is fat loss. And you mentioned earlier not using the scale weight as your number one indicator of progress, right? And I think if you are somebody who is looking to preserve muscle mass, so we're talking either maintain it or even grow some. If you can grow new tissue, that's awesome. We are really talking about fat loss versus just weight loss, and how do we minimize, body fat gain at this time, but at the same time preserve the muscle that we have, and hopefully maybe even build a little bit more muscle if we have the opportunity.
Yeah, for
Amazing.
sure.
Gotta love muscle. Okay. So the second thing you said was moving less, right? Moving less is something we often experience in midlife, or you see with your patients in midlife. Yeah. We spoke a little bit about the role of NEAT and how powerful that is as, as part of metabolism. What else do we need to talk about when it comes to movement? Is that really what it comes down to? Is it just keeping your NEAT and your overall activity levels up?
Yeah. I mean, again, it really depends on the person, right? Are they able to fit in the time to get in structured exercise? I will say for majority of my visits, when we kind of go through their entire week, their entire day, it takes time, right? To kind of really come up with a strategy and a plan here. But most of the time we can find that. We can find that time to say, okay, well, you know what? We have 20 minutes twice a week that we can get started. Let's start there, right? Yeah. I think what happens is for a lot of us, we can have this all or nothing thinking that, if I don't have, the 4 or 5 days a week to train, I'm just not going to do it at all, right? And so we have to start with where we're at. I think it's so incredibly important. One of the things I always say is that for a lot of us, we know sleep is good for us. We know exercise is important. We know fiber is important for us, protein, all the things, right? What I think for a lot of people, and this I think goes for you as well, Courtney, is they're coming to us for a strategy, right? To come up with that plan, to come up with the exact things to say, okay, for the next, 4 weeks, I want you to do this. And after that, I want you to do this, right? Like that's essentially what this is about. It's creating a strategy. It's going to work for your lifestyle and keep you accountable to that, because consistency is everything here, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that that's what I really try to encourage my patients on too is, again, if you have a day where things fall off, that's okay. We pick it back up the next day, right? It's about kind of falling into that consistent pattern as much as we can, versus having more of this all or nothing thinking. And that's actually why I think behavior change is one of the most important areas that we can focus on, because knowing does not equal doing, right? Motivation is always going to come and go. But when we focus on behavior change, it's going to create systems that keep you going when motivation drops, because it is going to drop, right?
Yeah,
Life is
yeah,
going to be
absolutely.
lifing in the background.
Yeah.
And so do you, for example, have nourishing meals to have prepped when you're busy? I always say, if you can do these things on your busiest day, amazing. Like,
You can do them on any other day then.
Exactly. Like, you've just proven that you can do this on even then your lighter days, right? Do you again move consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, right? Again, having those habits aligned with those long-term goals, and then having that accountability and support. It's just like with diet, right? There is no perfect menopause diet. There's no menopause diet, right? You need a way of living and eating that you can keep coming back to even when life gets hard, right?
Yeah. And it is so personal. It is so personal from one person to the next. But I love that you said systems, because you mentioned systems along the way there, and just systems is a sense of structure, and systems really is like the game plan. It's like, okay, these are our opportunities, and working with someone who can help you design that structure for yourself can go such a long way. One of the things that I also talk about with like some of my clients is exercise snacks.
Yes,
We
I
don't
love
need,
this too.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, like
Yeah.
just this idea of like, okay, let's see where we can find 10 minutes and commit to that. And you might even end up walking for 20. If you go for 10-minute walk, you're like, I'm good, I'm just gonna keep going. You never know. But just making it feel approachable, to break that all or nothing thinking is, you know, if your hour-long gym session is considered a meal that you don't have the appetite for, aka you don't have the time for, okay, let's start with 10 minutes of walking. Let's get that movement going. I have a client right now who is doing like, we've just worked our way up, right? Which we started with just do 2 exercise sessions a week, and we've worked our way up, and now we're including some shorter sessions that feel more actionable, so she can be more consistent and actually be training more days a week. But some of those sessions are smaller, right? They don't have to all be like an hour-long gym session to get movement into your life.
And that brought up for me, I might go a little bit on a rant right now.
Go for it.
So
I love your rants. I want to hear it.
One thing I was thinking about now with social media, right? What's happening is we're hearing all the messages: fasted training, non-fasted training, you know, high intensity, non-high intensity. Like, it's just always the back and forth. And if I look at like my journey with exercise, for me, and what's worked for my schedule is I have to work out in the morning. If I don't work out in the morning, like, it's not going to happen. I just know myself. Like, I'm not going to come home after a long clinic day and go to the gym. I need to go, 6:30 in the morning. And I will tell you right now, especially I'm looking outside, it's like getting dark now. It's November. Like, I do not feel motivated at all to go to the gym at 6:30 in the morning. I have to keep reminding myself I'm doing this for my future self. But I have this rule. I have the rule that when I go to the gym, I have to do at least 10 minutes. Okay. And after 10 minutes, I'm allowed to leave. Like, that's my rule. I have never left once, because after 10 minutes, I already feel amazing and I want to complete my workout. And if I think about all the messaging online now, again, I also don't feel hungry at 6 in the morning. So I do train fasted. And if I think about all the messaging around like, oh, don't train fasted, that would get in the barrier of me exercising, period.
Which
right?
is going to do way more damage.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Which is going to do way, like, really not going to be good for my overall health. So I'm more wanting to bring this up to say, when we say creating it for your lifestyle, this is exactly what we're talking about in that consistency of what works for you. Because a lot of this messaging, even fasted and fasted, is just not like even proven in humans. Okay. A lot of it is
no, exactly
that is coming out.
We are not mice.
We're not mice. No. And so I just want to really make that clear. Like, if you feel so overwhelmed by all the messages, this is exactly the perfect place to work with someone to say, hey, you know what? Like, I'm going to work with someone who is, evidence-based, who can follow, like, make me a plan. And that is what you are essentially investing in. You're investing in that accountability and that plan. And that is priceless, right? Because you're now overcoming a lot of the barriers that you had before.
Absolutely. Like, I have a coach. I am a coach, but I have a coach. My brother, who is a top tier coach has a coach, because we all need that externalization of our thoughts in a way, right? It's so hard. We make so many decisions over the course of a day. We're exposed to so much information that we're constantly trying to filter, to then take on the burden of like, I got to filter all this for myself, then unite it with my own personal bias and my experience, versus outsourcing that. Outsourcing that is so powerful. And like you said, it's an investment. It's an investment in peace of mind. It's an investment in your ability to be consistent. It's an investment in designing a game plan and a strategy that works for you. And I love that you touched on like your own experience, right? Like I would never say like, well, you're not hungry in the morning, you must eat to maximize the workout, because you're probably not going to have a good workout if you're sitting there feeling undigested and uncomfortable. Like, so we need to really, really put the personal experience at the center and the individual at the center, and stop trying to make these like blanket claims. There are factual truths out there. 100%. There are factual truths. But when it comes to lifestyle strategies around both movement and diet, it has to be individualized without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Okay. That was movement. But which of the other kind of action items do you want to talk about? Because we talked about like fatigue and sleep disruption and things like that. There's also, of course, like, you know, nutrition is at the core of it as well. And I'd love to just, even if we can touch on that quickly, of what's actually driving changes with nutrition. But what part would you like to tackle first in that?
Yeah. And I think you touched on this before. Sleep, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones that I see in my practice. So if we're specifically talking about midlife and menopause, 40 to 60% of women are going to experience sleep disturbances. It's significant during this time. And the most common thing that we see is the sleep maintenance insomnia. So it's a lot of them will say, okay, I have no problem falling asleep, but they cannot stay asleep. So very uninterrupted sleep. They may be waking up every 1 or 2 hours. And of course, it's going to really impact their overall health. And so they could maybe get a total of 6-7 hours, but it's very like fragmented.
Yeah. And it's not good quality sleep.
No, not at all. And that's definitely one area that, you know, if that's the first thing I see, it's the first thing I work on with my patients is the sleep component, because as you know, it affects everything else, right?
It does.
So
it does.
that is one thing I really, really want to highlight to anyone listening. If you are experiencing sleep disturbances, there's so many things we can do to help. Again, it's going to be individualized to you. One thing just I also want to highlight here that I feel like I've had so many conversations in office this week. That's why it's top of mind. But the number of times that we normalize going to urinate at night, like 3-4 times a night, and we just think it's normal. Because again, because of aging, right? Like, oh, because we turned 40, because we turned 50, or whatever the case is, I'm just going to the bathroom multiple times a night. And that is the one thing I want to say, that is not normal, to go to the bathroom that much. So sometimes that may be due to water intake, but not always. Like we need to have our pelvic floor assessed, see a pelvic floor physiotherapist. We need to look at if there's GSM, which is genital urinary syndrome of menopause. Do you have dryness, irritation, bladder changes due to loss of estrogen? Like there's so many things that need to be looked at there. And I want to highlight that one specifically because a lot of people don't link that. They don't link the constantly waking up to go to the bathroom with having that poor quality sleep. So yeah,
it's not just as simple as like, okay, let's stop drinking water by 8 p.m. or something. Like maybe that could be a factor.
Potentially, but not always, right?
But there could be more.
People. Exactly. Yeah. And so if that's not fixing it for you, right, then we need to look at other causes. So when I talk about sleep with my patients, we definitely go through a whole list of things, when it comes to what could be contributing there. I mean, partner plays a big role here, right? Like I always say, you could be doing all the things. You have your sleep mask, it's dark room, the temperature is great, you're doing all things, you're going to bed at a good time, but then you have partner who maybe is snoring, maybe they're on their phones, they're watching TV, and like that light is impacting you. Like there could be many things there too that we need to explore. One of my colleagues, Dr. Wagni Filate, she's a sleep doctor, and she says this best. She says it's not called a sleep divorce, it's a shared sleep action plan. right? So it's
Ah,
about coming together and creating a plan, because I also don't like the term sleep divorce. I really think it has such a
it
negative
has a negative
connotation.
connotation. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the idea of like you're creating a plan together that so you can both be well rested. It actually, research has shown that it improves intimacy, improves the relationship, right? Because you're no longer so frustrated at each other all the time. So again, maybe sleeping in separate sleeping arrangements could be something that is done. Again, so what I mean is we kind of explore all these different areas that could be impacting your sleep and making sure that that is optimized.
So powerful. So powerful and so foundational, right? I mean, I think this goes so far beyond body composition, but I am going to tie it back to that because I think sleep is just quality of life, period. It's health outcomes,
Mm-hmm.
it's quality of life, it's relationship health in a lot of ways, as you just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just because I'm going to tie it back to body composition and just say, like, if you don't have your sleep in check, it is going to make everything you need to do to maintain or change your body composition
Mm-hmm.
much, much, much harder.
Mm-hmm.
If you are waking up in the middle of the night and not getting deep quality sleep and you are fatigued, you're going to be dragging yourself to do any form of exercise or movement, whether that is your NEAT and just a walk around the block or it's a more structured training session. Both those things are going to be impacted. And, chances are when we are more tired and lethargic, our NEAT does naturally go down. So if you do not have a strategy to make sure that you maintain that, you're going to move less, you're going to expend less, and it will have an impact on your ability to lose body fat or your ability to, maintain your current body composition. I think
And
the
it
other
affects, for sure. Sorry, go ahead.
no, keep going.
I was going to say, and to add to that, also affects your hunger and satiation hormones.
That was
That's okay.
exactly
Perfect.
where I was going. Yes,
I'll
100%.
let you finish.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. We're always on the same page. I love it. I think, the hunger hormones are regulated by sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not only is it a matter of, when you're tired, you don't necessarily maybe make as intentional decisions in general. There is that, but it's not just the fatigue component. It is actually the ability of your hormones to help you regulate appetite does
Mm-hmm.
change when you are sleep deprived. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
fact. So now if
Mm-hmm.
we look at the two big levers we can pull when it comes to managing body composition, we're talking about movement and we're talking about diet. Both of those are dependent on sleep hygiene.
For sure. Yeah.
So if you need help mastering your sleep, please go talk to a professional or someone like Dr. D who can help you understand exactly why your sleep might be disturbed by some of your menopause symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So nutrition kind of has played a role across, I think, the entirety of the conversation so far. But you mentioned earlier, there is no menopause diet. So I want to go back to that and be like,
Mm-hmm.
there is no menopause diet, right? First of all, I'm a very firm believer in this idea of there is no one best diet, period. It's always going to be so person dependent. Anything that has a name usually gives me some sort of heebie-jeebies. But if we're talking about dietary considerations, let's say, we're not going to tell people what to eat here, but we're going to say, what are the things that we need to be concerned with or be attentive to when it comes to midlife and the menopause transition as it pertains to diet, and tie that back into body composition because we'll do that too.
For sure. So I would say the key things that I focus on, number one, fiber. So fiber is a key component. I always say we want to be aiming, anywhere between 25 to 30 grams a day. And for most people, if they've never really paid attention to it or tracked it, are not really hitting anywhere near that. Like on average for most people, maybe it's around 12 to 15 grams a day. So about half of what they need.
Yeah.
So that is something I always like to start with. Fiber, exhaustive list of the benefits, right? Like there's so many benefits to it. Including, cholesterol management and blood sugar management. And when it comes to keeping us full and satiated, it's such an important part of our diet that I think that really is a staple piece for sure.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I have some clients who we track food and others don't necessarily to the same extent. But either way, I have a way of monitoring fiber intake with them. And that's something I'm very, very, very mindful of because when somebody is able to hit their fiber targets, it usually is also an indicator that they are eating a primarily whole foods diet, right? And so that also gives us some indication that, okay, they're eating a balanced diet that allows us to make sure we're taking care of other micronutrients as well. And so that's really, really important. And that can be, having a certain number of servings of fruits and veg and grains and things like that. But when it comes to tracking food, I think people do get very hung up on calories and macros. So any of my clients who are tracking food in their spreadsheets, I usually have a column for fiber because I want to know where you're at with that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because I do think it's so important to make sure that we're monitoring that and at least understanding then, it gives us the right to then go in and say, okay, well, what food actually contributed to me hitting my fiber target today? So I can look at that and be like, hey, on these 3 days, you hit your fiber goals. What did you eat that helped you get there? Maybe that's something we want to include more of. Or, hey, on this day, we were a little bit behind. What might have happened there? And I think it's not being overly, nitpicky about numbers, but it's about recognizing the patterns that actually support your ability to get fiber in, because we do know it's so foundational for overall health.
Summarized it beautifully.
Oh, well, my summary was piggybacked on your summary. So I love that you started with fiber. So let's move on to other dietary considerations.
Yeah. And then when it comes to protein, again, we kind of have a range depending of course on someone's like lifestyle and exercise and their health goals. I would say what I typically aim for and what the research supports is a minimum of 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's kind of like the minimum that I'm typically looking at. And then again, it can go up to maybe 1.5, 1.8 grams per kilogram, depending what our goals are. So that's a great place to start. Now, one thing I do want to highlight, because as you mentioned, we are talking about fat loss.
Yes.
In my experience, again, of course, we're talking about protein. Protein is incredibly important. But I've also seen in my practice where women are, through social media, like really aware of protein intake now. And they're maybe, getting 150 grams or like upwards of that per day. And I always just come back to, again, making sure that we are looking at, if our goal is fat loss, we still want to support muscle during it. But sometimes if they've never tracked their food before and all they've done is they've like massively increased their protein, they could have really increased their calories as well.
Yes.
So I just want to highlight that. This obviously, again, very individualized to the person, but what we know about fat loss, and I just want to highlight this because I don't think we specifically stated it, is that what the research shows, and again, menopause is no different, is that it was going to require a sustained calorie deficit.
Yes. Yay. Sorry, my hands are up in the air if anyone's listening and not watching.
That might be 250 to 500 calorie deficit. Again, it's going to be dependent on the person, and you make sure you have someone that you can calculate this with and what that is for you. But that's where I want to really just highlight that with protein. Again, I'm all for protein and making sure we get it in, but if the goal is fat loss, we still need to make sure we are in that calorie deficit. Now, yes, perimenopause can make sustaining that calorie deficit a little bit more challenging, as we talked about, with maybe appetite increasing, sleep quality being poor, muscle mass may have decreased. And again, that's all going to affect things like energy balance. But overall, we still need to be looking. So if it's fat loss, we need to be in that calorie deficit sustained to see the results that we want. And then maybe your goals and your protein goals can change after maybe that fat loss has taken place. So just want to highlight.
Absolutely. That is like the grand finale moment that is going to tie this all back together. So I'm really, really excited that you brought this up now, because fat loss will not happen in the absence of a calorie deficit, period. So if anybody tells you anything else, I would give you permission to close your ears, if that's a thing. If you can close your ears or close your eyes or whatever. If you're reading it online or you're hearing it somewhere, you do need to have a calorie deficit to invoke fat loss. And you're right. Like if you are increasing your protein, that's awesome. Some people increase their protein intake and they feel more full because protein is satiating, or maybe it diverts their attention away from other food sources. So then some people naturally achieve a calorie deficit when they start including more protein, but it depends on how you're including more protein, right? Exactly. If you are just like, I'm just grabbing like now 3 protein bars a day, those are actually quite calorie dense. So you might be getting a protein levels up, but also your overall calorie levels are up, which is going to make it harder to lose body fat. Okay. So I think this is the perfect way for us to start like tying all this together, because at the end of the day, we do need a calorie deficit to manage fat loss, whether you're in menopause transition or not, whether you're male or female. That is a proven fact. So now everything that we have talked about today brings us back to that point in one way or another, right? Everything we've talked about around like lifestyle and movement and diet, all of that really just goes back to our ability to create or adhere to a calorie deficit. So you started up front, Dee, by saying that, there are some reasons why we often see weight gain in menopause. It is less driven by hormones. Some of it is more fat distribution patterns driven by hormones, but the actual amount of body fat that we gain is not so much driven by the hormonal changes or the menopause transition itself, but all of the lifestyle variables that accompany that. And now, if I may summarize quickly, when we think about a calorie deficit, it It is calories in, calories out. And that is overly simplified, but that is the equation. At the end of the day, though, both the calories in and the calories out are going to be affected by lifestyle variables. So if you are struggling with appetite management because of sleep disruptions, if you're if you are feeling way more stressed about being in the peak of your career, then that's going to change the calories inside of the equation. That is going to change your ability to moderate calorie intake. Now, on the other side, if you're fatigued, experiencing menopause symptoms, if you are struggling with sedentary lifestyle, all of those things that happen in the life stage, that's going to impact the calories outside. So now we can see how all of the discussion today has really contributed to helping us understand why that equation feels more challenging to manage and why it can be more challenging to achieve a calorie deficit in the menopause stage of life. Did I do that justice? I know that we had a big conversation that got us there, but
yeah.
That
was a great summary.
Thank you. Any thoughts you want to add on that?
No, I think we covered a lot. Yeah, I hope that any listeners feel more informed after this conversation. And no, thank you for having this conversation. I think it's so incredibly important.
And we'll have to bring you back on maybe to dive into some of the nuances, because today was just a great way for us to get that full, well-rounded view of the lifestyle changes that are really happening during menopause and how that relates to body composition. But I know you have a lot more expertise in that big brain of yours, around many things, but especially when it comes to menopause and helping women really feel their ultimate best during that phase of life and helping them feel in charge and in control and removing that sense of helplessness. So if anybody listening to this wants more intel from you or wants to connect with you, wants to follow along all the amazing, brilliant information you have, where can they find you?
So the best place to find me where I'm most active would be Instagram, and that's at Dr. Dr. Daiana Castleman. And then I also have my website, dianacastleman.com. And
Amazing.
My first name has 3 A's in it, Daiana.
We will put all of the notes and the links to Dee's resources in the description below, so you have easy access to find her and all of her brilliant content.
Thanks,
Daiana,
so much,
thank
Courtney.
you so much. Well, thank you for joining us and for sharing all your brilliance. So without further ado, everyone, we will leave you for this week, and we will be back in your feeds with a different episode of Truth Talks with a new guest again next week. So until then, though, have an amazing week ahead. Thanks, Dr. Daiana Castleman, for joining us today. If you have questions for her, or if there's aspects of this conversation you'd love to see us revisit in a future episode, please drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much. Bye for now.